with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And the music you hear in the background is from my very good friend, Jeff Brisbane. It's called I Wish You Enough. And we do wish you enough as we try to avoid the maze of life. And my guest today, Gina Riley, you appear to be doing that with your coaching and your background. And as I read your bio, it just kept going on. And it was like, what an interesting person. Like, what can I learn from Gina today? So welcome, and give us a little bit of a background.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's really kind of you. Background. I have a career in HR. I now sit kind of at the convergence of doing some occasional executive search. I consult for another company. I started my own company doing career coaching. My primary target are leaders and executives who are in career transition, which marries nicely with the people that I interview when I'm, occasionally taking executive search assignments. And then I also do interview skills training inside companies, corporations. So it all kind of gels when it comes to my own, coaching program that I've developed.
Right.
I've had a front row seat watching people go through the turbulent times of trying to interview, the nerves, the storytelling that doesn't always come across in ways that they would hope and would land. So really, my passion is about helping people communicate better. At the end of all of this, it's how do you communicate succinctly? How do you connect so your messages resonate? And so that you can achieve that success that you want when you're going for a desirable job.
I haven't interviewed in a long time, so I guess I'm pretty lucky, or maybe not so lucky. But I've listened to my husband do numerous interviews, especially on Zoom or Microsoft Teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it quite interesting because he is a storyteller. And sometimes I'll be in the background, I'll be thinking, stop, don't say so much, but of course I can't say that to him because number one, it would unnerve him. But yet there are other times I find that he will sit there and almost be like a robot. You ask me a question, I'm going to give you the answer. So he goes one way or the other. And I think interviewing has to be very, very difficult because you don't know what the other person wants from you.
Mm-hmm.
So
that resonates.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so how can you help somebody who, does one or the other, flips, flops? How do you figure out what the interviewer is really looking for?
Right. So when I'm working with folks, we get to the part where we are doing interview prep. The foundation of the prep starts with you and your own unique, I call it your awesome sauce. What makes you special and unique in how you approach your work? So I have ways of doing that, and we unpack that uniqueness. And then we also unpack a person's leadership approach. Now you have the actual language and words that can help you authentically communicate how you're doing what you do. On top of that, there's interview prep. And the interview prep is geared squarely against what the decision makers need out of that candidate should they be the finalist when they start the job. What are the outcomes that they anticipate that they want to have if you are the one who's getting hired? So the first breadcrumb trail before you really get any FaceTime with anybody is you look at the job description. What is the company trying to achieve? Where are they going? What's the strategic direction? Have they just gotten funding? Are they going to grow? Are they going to shrink? Are they going to, reorganize, et cetera? Taking a look at initially where that company is going, and then looking at the outcomes for that role and trying to develop stories that really address their pain points.
Okay.
And then I use the Soar methodology. So many people who do coaching for, interviews will use different methods. People will use CAR and PAR. I use Soar. They're all just kind of an iteration upon themselves.
Sure.
The reason why I like the Soar method is, especially for leaders, you're helping them understand first the situation or the context. And you want to be able to lay down that context quickly. And here, to your point, is where people go down a rabbit hole and they'll give way too much context. So part of what I'm doing with the people that I'm coaching is they're getting the wiggles out, so to speak, by getting all these stories down on paper, and then they're telling them all to me. And then I'm helping them remove details that's going to put the interviewer to sleep. It's going to create, the glazed eyes.
Right. Exactly.
So first, you're setting up the situation or context. Then you're explaining the obstacles or the challenges. And you're doing that so that you're explaining to the person listening to you, why are you bothering to even tell me this particular story, right? Well, and how does it relate to what that decision maker needs to hear in the conversation? Then the fourth part of the storytelling format is the actions. What actions did you take? And what actions did your team take? So if you're a leader, you're finding a balance in the way that you're describing your approach with, here's the things I did as a leader. I gathered my team. I created a way for us to collaborate across functions. Then my team, we did what? And you want to find that balance so you're showcasing humility and yet strength as a leader. And then the fourth part of the construct is, what was the result that you all got? Can you quantify it? Can you put a dollar sign or a percentage sign to it? Or can you show us a sliding scale of impact? We increased customer satisfaction by a certain percentage, we were able to improve our company culture scores by a certain percentage. There's different ways to express the impact that you make throughout, that whole storytelling narrative.
Very interesting, because I have found, even myself in the past, somebody, throwing out a question at me, and it's like, oh, I know the answer to that, but I go around the barn giving that answer. And then I'm sitting there in the middle of it going, I've lost them. And, I've never prepped for an interview, which I think is quite interesting, because I hear more and more people who have said, I'm glad that I prepped for the interview, because if I hadn't prepped, I would have been around and around in a circle, just like you just showed. Exactly. So what made you decide that this was something that you wanted to do for other people? Because, so many of us have all these dreams of what we want to do, and yet we either don't have the skills or we don't know how to get the skills to do it.
Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a natural progression. I know that a lot of people have winding career paths, and that makes for a really interesting story. I'm not sure if mine's so much interesting. However, it's mine. And it really started when I was 15 or 16, when I was in high school, and I got exposed to personal development and leadership programs. So I was, attending retreats. I got exposed to incredible motivational speakers who are mentors of mine, which led me to study communication in college, really understanding organizational development, personal development, how do people interact with each other, and then how do they do that, across cultures. So that gave me kind of that foundation, which, another option might have been, let's say, psychology or sociology.
Sure.
So that's what I chose to study. My goal was really to find a way to be in a role in my life where I was helping other people communicate better, more crisply, connect, build relationships. And so even though I didn't set out necessarily to be, now in my 50s as a career transition coach, all of the things that I've done have layered to get me here. It's been foundational. Having a career in human resources, doing executive search, getting a master's degree in whole systems design, which is akin to some of the skills that I may have picked up if I had gotten a formal coaching certification. So I was listening to one of your other podcasts, and one of the discussions you had is, what are the differences between consulting and coaching, et cetera. And I sit a little bit at the convergence. The people that hire me and invest, their time and resources with me, they want answers. They don't expect me to guide them with only open-ended questions. So I provide that framework to help guide them through that, but I don't have all the answers. It emerges.
Right. And I love that answer that you just gave, because on the weekends, I work and I do training and sales support in IT in a big box store. And as I tell, the associates, I can show you certain ways to approach things, but
Right.
you also have to redevelop it for you. Because if you do it exactly the way I do it, and that's not your personality, it's just not going to work. And in the beginning, they look at me like, but you're here to help me. I am here to help you, but I'm here to find out more about you and find out how you can do this, or if you even want to, because typically they're there for a paycheck. They're not there for a career. And I understand that. But then I say to them, but this could be a foundation for that career you're going to have. And that's how, I learn best. Okay, this may not be the exact thing I want to do right now, but how can this help me do what I really want to do? What are the things I
Absolutely.
can take from it? And that's why I love that we have so many coaches out there, because we all need to be guided a little bit differently. So when you're doing an executive search for a company, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out here who want to know, because my husband gets phone calls 24/7. It seems like, oh, I have the best job for you, but please send me your resume. And he's going, well, wait a second. How do you have the best job for me if you need my resume? You must have read my resume. So I know there are good job search individuals out there, and I know there are others that are they're cold calling. So how can somebody really know the difference when they get that call?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're right. There are different recruiters with different levels of experience and expertise. I'm just going to give you what I would do, my advice
Absolutely.
To people, because there's a lot of pockets out there. The first thing that it's important to understand is there's different types of recruiters. There may be in-house recruiters who work for that actual corporation. They may have ties internally to their business units and truly understand the business, at least superficially, and have a connection to hiring teams. They may be a part of a pool of recruiters for that corporation and operating on their behalf. A lot of companies outsource these recruitment efforts with pools of recruiters. So those people are a little more removed, or a lot more removed from the process. And they also may not be the best representation of the company brand either.
Right.
So there's that bucket. Then we have a pocket of recruiters called contingency or contingent recruiters. These people do not have a formal contract necessarily with a company where they're exclusively doing a search for them. There could be multiple contingent search firms or even internal recruiters who are all competing to find that right person for a said job. That's not bad. It's not, one way or the other. It just is. And what it does is it creates a more competitive situation for the recruiter. They get paid if they win getting that job filled. And that's a very difficult place. You're coming from a sales position in that role. So back to your question, what does the candidate do? How do you vet? Let's go into that third bucket, particularly for the leadership level. That's my space I'm in. So I consult for Talents Group. We do executive search, and we specialize in finding leaders and executives. We're experienced at vetting for the leadership skills. It doesn't mean that we can't also vet for, some of the functional expertise, for the IT leader, for the HR leader, you name it, manufacturing leader, et cetera. But what we're doing is we have an exclusive contract with that company and an intimate partnership with the decision makers. So if it's a CEO, we're working directly with the board. If it's one of the leadership level team members, like a VP of HR, we're working directly with the CEO. So we're constantly communicating, texting, we're vetting all those candidates. Any candidate that gets referred has to come through the executive search firm, because we're the ones with the bird's eye view about the entire process. And we're the ones comparing and then offering our advice. And we're not throwing resumes over the wall.
Right.
We're doing front end vetting. I just came off of a CEO search myself for a nonprofit. It's $100 million nonprofit, extremely complex. So, I'm doing 30 front end, initial half-hour phone screens, trying to understand people's interest, seeing if they're in the right target for salary, all of those things, and trying to get a read on people's EQ, frankly, in that first initial conversation. And then I'm doing like 90-minute deeper conversations so that I can explain to the board why they even want to take a look at these top 10 people, for example. And I'm not selling anybody. I'm trying to do storytelling around why any of these people are worth their time to continue in the process. Then we go through a couple more layers internally to find the CEO, because if you're not going to do a measured process with experienced people that you're partnering with your executive search firm, why would you bother to spend all that money?
So it's interesting now because you got to give us a better perspective. Number one, why the search and the hiring does take as long as it does, because many of us sit back and go, well, I answered, I sent in my resume in February. Okay. And now it's April and I'm just getting a call, and we're going like, if you really wanted me, why didn't you call me in February? But this explains it. You have to go through all those resumes, determine which are the ones that you are going to make that first call to.
Well, yeah. And you also need to understand too, as resumes are coming into a pipeline, those documents vary. Some people do a very poor job at explaining their unique value proposition. Right. They have a list of tasks, even at the executive and senior level, on that resume, which is not what we need to see. We need to see right at the top quarter and third of those resumes, here's the impact I have had on other similar organizations. The very first resume I received for this nonprofit CEO job that I can still remember because it was so shocking to me. It was a person applying for the CEO job, managing and leading, hundreds of people. And it was a person out of the country who was a sort of a leader in the manufacturing space. I needed someone with a medical background.
There's a difference.
So what candidates don't understand is we have to cull through a lot of stuff and actually read the resumes to get to that point. But I realized I didn't actually answer your question. How does the candidate, as you get a phone call, vet? You can go to LinkedIn, look at the person's profile, see if they work for a company that appears reputable, that they have some standing. For example, I'm with a company that's been in their space for 12 years. You go look at the leader. She has been a leader in talent acquisition for 30 years. The team is experienced. We have a website with our faces on it, with our bios. You can go see what we post on LinkedIn. It's all high quality, professional content. You can also go through and you can find people. And if someone's been recruiting for about 2 years and you're going for a leadership level position, you need to make assumptions. This is a person who's probably a screener. What does the screener need to know? Probably some baseline things. Are you willing to relocate? What is your salary range? Don't get cagey on it. Here's my range that makes it worth all of our time. There's things that person needs to know to make them successful in that job. It's up to the leader who's getting screened to pick up on that. You probably have a lot more experience with people than that screener. So you're not going for the pie in the sky. What is the strategy of the company? They probably don't know.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, that explains a lot that I've been watching my husband go through. And it also explains a lot that the position that he just got, um, he knew more about the position than he thought he did. And so he was answering a lot of those questions very directly. Um, and when they asked him what he's achieved, usually that's where that long story goes in, you know, and he sort of shortened it up that day. And the funny part was he wasn't sure he even wanted the job.
Mhm.
And he even said to me when he got off the phone, um, they're not going to call me back. And I looked at him and I said, well, if you didn't really want the job, why did you interview for it?
Mm.
And he goes, well, I don't know. But then they called him a week later for a second interview. And he said, something strange. They're calling me back and want a second interview. I said, well, if you don't want the job, don't take the second interview. And he goes, no, I've been thinking about it. And he took the second interview. And again, I said to him, be precise. You
Mm.
know, if they try to dig and get you to storytell, please don't, because it hasn't been working for you.
Mm.
And, um, you know, he did his best at being precise. This is for a guy who loves, I think he should be sitting on a front porch telling stories to people as they walk by. But anyways, 2 days later, he got a call and they said it was, they were very interested in him. They had picked up on the fact that he was past retirement age, but they were impressed with the fact
Mhm.
that he was keeping on top of things and wanted to work.
Mm.
And the first day at work, he was congratulated for showing up. And he said, like,
Imagine
what?
that, a
Yeah,
generation of people that actually arrive at their job. Yeah.
exactly. And that's what he said to them. He said, well, you hired me. And they go, yes, we know, but we can't tell you why the process takes so long because oftentimes that person doesn't show up. And every day when he walks into work, they say to him, you're back. I mean, they celebrate him. Um, and he works harder than a lot of their younger people. But the point I'm trying to make is that he finally, I think, learned from me sitting in the background, those stories that you were telling. They were interesting, but it took up too much of their time.
Well, here's the thing is you only get, let's say, you have to gauge your time. I have a half hour. What kind of interview is this? Probably more of a screening. 45 minutes to an hour, they may dip into some relevant questions, but let's say you have to like remember there's the opening. Oh, the nice get to know you. Hi,
Right.
this is who I am. There's going to be a closing and next steps. As that time starts to winnow down and you get a real question, behavioral or competency based, you need to get as many stories in that tiny window as possible. So again, especially for people who are further along in their careers and have developed, the ability to read the room, whether it's virtual or not, you have to gauge your time. If you're not getting in enough stories, they can't learn enough about you. And frankly, people that are going to tell a 10-minute long story just for one, you're going to lose your interviewer. They're going to do their best to like not look away. They're just trying to be polite. And a lot of people don't know how to clip and cut people off. And, in this last search, when I had people that were rambling, I would tell them at the beginning, I would let them know, if a story is going too long, I'm going to politely clip you. The reason why is I want you to have as many chances to tell all the stories I need you to tell. And I have 8 things I'm going to ask you. So you need to help me help manage your time. And that helps people sit up. But remember, I have experience interviewing people and I train other people on how to be an interviewer. Most people don't know how to do that.
Well, and I've seen that happen quite a bit. It's interesting because my younger son has has been working for a very large business, and he was what they call the manager in training. And basically, even though he wasn't HR, he was hiring for that department. And, the first thing he said was, well, I'm excited that you want me to interview, but that wasn't really part of my college training. I've
Yeah.
never done it before. And they said, okay, well, we'll sit in with you. These are the basic questions you're going to ask.
Mhm.
But we also want you to think about, if you were on the other side of the table, how would you like those questions proposed to you? And he ended up just loving that part of the job. And it was interesting because his manager, who also did some of the hiring, didn't have the success rate that my son had. And my son
Nice.
finally said to him, it's because you told me to think of myself on the other side of the desk. How would I answer that? If that's a question I'm asking and they're going to answer it long-winded because you're asking for a lot of meat, he said, I
Mhm.
had to cut that question down so that they could answer me in segments.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting because a lot of interviewers, like you said, are not trained and they sort of pick it up. Some are going to be good at it, some are not. So I'm sure as a young girl, um, going to school, elementary school, high school, this probably wasn't your dream path, or was it?
Well, what I would say is when I was in high school, that was the awakening. It was like, this is a little bit before, let's say, like a Tony Robbins hit the scene.
Okay.
And I was exposed to people who were doing fabulous motivational speaking. And I felt very, very inspired. And so for me, it was, I want to be that. I want to do that for other people. I want to help other people have those realizations. So if you had asked my 16 to 22-year-old self, I really could envision myself in front of an entire high school doing motivational speeches, and then, doing breakout sessions and facilitating, different activities as I had, in my earlier part of my development
Yeah.
process. And even in college, I was taking some of those things that I had applied early on and used it to create a couple of workshops at my college that people were paying to come to. And I brought in some of the motivational speakers that I had worked with in my youth to help me manage and lead some of that. So I saw myself really working with either high school students or college students. And we have a huge need for something like that today. My career path just didn't lead me in that direction. I kind of fell into going into corporate. I worked for Intel for 10 years. I got a master's degree and applied that directly, into the corporate world. And then I took a 15-year break and I was at home with 2 boys. So my entry was back in through my friend's executive search firm and helping her with projects and branding and all kinds of other things and doing, search. So my path didn't take me that way, but I still feel like it completely relates to communicating better, relating better, being crisp with our messages, and making good connections.
Well, it's interesting because many of us think that um, when we change career paths, that we really are changing drastically. And the more people I talk to, the realization is something really is leading into, the next path.
Oh, yeah.
There, we know, even if we don't know exactly what we're good at,
Mhm.
we can sort of feel it as we move forward. Like yourself, when I was in high school, I really wanted to be a broadcaster. That was my dream. I would sit in my room and I would, tell the news to the 4 walls. And when I went away to college, I told my parents I was going to major in communications. And my parents said, absolutely do not. You go and you get your teaching degree because you'll be safe. And 2 years later, when I called them and I said, I'm getting my associates in communications this weekend, my parents like were livid. It was like I had, wasted their money. Um, and every job I took from that point forward, I did something with communications. And even
Mhm.
if I didn't do it at the job, I did it outside the job. And I finally decided that, you know what? I'm at least doing what I love to do. And I may not be doing it full time, but
Mhm.
that's okay. And it wasn't until my youngest was graduating high school that I said, I'm going back for my master's.
Mhm.
And eventually I'm going to put this all together. And I have. And what I love about it is that, like you are helping people, I feel that bringing you to an audience, I'm helping people. And we all want to feel at the end of the day that we've accomplished something. And
Absolutely.
it's it's amazing what we can do. So how can my listeners find you? I mean, you've got a wealth of information and a wealth of ideas.
So two places are I would lead people to. One is I have my own website, Gina Riley consulting.com. And what I think is especially helpful are two things. One is at the top, I have a button that you can click on and you can download for free a 30-minute webinar, and it comes with a workbook, and you can make a career transition plan based on frameworks that I believe work. So that's something that people can do. And it help, I just feel really good about being able to help people think about their job search differently. So
Sure.
there's that. There's an articles and resources tab. I have a series called How Your Next Executive Role Finds You. I have 8 or 9 articles featuring executives who use the power of networking to land in their subsequent jobs. And it's a lot of different kinds of stories. So that's especially, I think, helpful. The other place is on LinkedIn. And I always recommend, if you're going to connect with anybody on LinkedIn, make sure you send a personalized connection request, even if you know them, and let them know why. Hey, I heard you on a podcast. I read an article, something that allows people to feel really good about clicking yes and not making them to go do research about you. We all get sales pitches. A lot of leaders in particular get a lot of pitches from recruiters that don't feel maybe good. So just make sure you do that and make it super easy for people to say yes, so you can diversify your network.
I love it. Well, I just want you to know, Gina, that about 2 months ago, I posted that I've developed a new title for myself. It's called a coaching advocate.
Nice.
And I have been reaching out to our listeners saying, if you're looking for a coach and you don't know which coach you want, maybe you heard them on the podcast, maybe you heard of somebody in the meantime. I have a database, and now Gina, you're in my database, and
Oh, thank you.
I want individuals to know that, the difference between coaching and going for therapy and, asking your best friend what you should do. There is a huge variety of reasons. And right now I'm working with 3 different coaches, and they all know that I'm working with different ones. And the reason being is that they all give me just a little bit more guidance.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's wonderful. In the past, I always was afraid to ask anybody for help, because if I asked, I felt that I wasn't being smart. And the
Mm,
reality is you're smarter when you ask for help and guidance and
yeah.
assistance.
Oh, yeah. Well, even as sitting in the coaching seat, yeah, we don't have all the answers. People are hiring us for answers, and that's okay. We should have frameworks that work. And I that's what I've built, and I'm confident in that. There are parts that of my process that organically develop based on my expertise and based on that person's unique situation. And so we always come to this one convergence with networking, and I'm helping each person figure out their strategy based on their own personality, how they want to approach it, how vibrant or not the network is. Some people have to start from scratch. And I'm offering up different books and resources that they need to actually start with to generate the sort of the underpinnings on how they're going to reach out to people. So, I mean, you're right. We learn from every single touch point with every coaching client as well. And that knowledge helps the next person and helps the next person. I develop new material because of the brilliant people I work with. So it's the gift that keeps on giving.
I love it. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us, Gina. And if you forgot everything that Gina said, how to reach her and whatever, don't worry. It's going to be in the show notes. So go back to the show notes. You'll just be able to click. You'll be able to get to her website. We'll also give you the link for LinkedIn. And if you're ready to ask her to be your connection on LinkedIn, please tell her how you heard about her, because you know what? It's going to make a little better connection than if you just say, hey, Gina, let's connect. So have a great day. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.